Chris Hargrave has a choose your own adventure for us. So I don't know how you want us to choose, if you want us to type in the chat or whatever, but take it away.
I'm going to give you guys some options. So please go ahead and unmute yourselves. I really don't like the muted webinar style thing. And just feel free, you can talk over each other. We'll sort it out if it gets confusing. But what I'm working with tonight is I went ahead and put together 3 impromptu presentations for you guys. One would be the languages of the snow sports industry business. So the way that leaders communicate and sort of understanding how that works and building connections there. The other would be an in-depth look at half pipe riding. And I intend to use videos of Toby Miller as examples, so we can walk through and do analysis and maybe grow some understanding about some of the things that I like to share with my athletes. The secrets of what I coach, I guess, maybe. And the third option would be a full walkthrough and explanation and story of the new indoor snow sports complex in New Jersey, which of course will open up here soon. but our grand opening was in December. I got tons of footage, and it's such an incredible process. And we could walk through what it looks like to understand how an urban community actually embraces the snow sports. And it's way different than anything I think anyone could have expected. So it's just so freaking cool though. So all 3 of those I think would be a lot of fun. I figured I'd give you guys 3 choices. The group can pick. So if you guys want to, option 1, the languages of resort business. Now this will help you understand how to communicate with your leadership if that's something you've ever struggled with. At least I'll do my best to help you there. Option 2, in-depth half pipe coaching analysis session. Option 3, in-depth walkthrough of big snow and how an urban environment urban demographic is embracing snow sports. That sum it up for you guys? And let's see, if you guys want to vote, you can vote in chat or you can just say it out loud.
Chris, can you run through those again?
Oh, you bet. So option 1 is, again, a presentation discussion about the languages of leadership in the snow sports industry, and how to build connections there. Option 2 is a in-depth share of how I coach and approach half pipe with my athletes. And I'll get into some of the ideas and concepts therein that probably I would think they would help everyone in the group, of course. And then option 3 is a walkthrough of Big Snow American Dream and how unique and interesting that environment is for teaching snow sports, and how it's impacting that community in New Jersey and New York.
Hey, Chris.
Yes, sir.
So it looks like a lot of people are picking the pipe option, which was
I don't blame them.
I'm sure that's pretty obvious, but I just wonder, like, I seem to have gotten on a bunch of these calls, and it seems like most of the calls when we get into hard skills goes down the path of coaching, athletes, coaching. And athletes are in for an absolutely different experience than students and instructors. And like, I just feel like sometimes we get away from, like, this is like an AASI, RMT, Tech Talk versus like an NSA, a USASA coaches course. You know what I mean? If people want to go that way, I don't want to speak for everybody. I'm speaking purely for myself. Like, because when we get into coaching and athletes, people are trying to perform at their highest piece versus understanding the standard, trying to perform to a standard, trying to, like, it's a totally different thing. And I think we sometimes put those together. And I think coaching and training and teaching are opposite. So I don't know what everybody thinks, and I'm not speaking for anybody but myself, but I would like the half pipe thing would be cool if we can take it through instructor and trainer pathway versus a coaching high end, like prepare people for the Olympic pathway.
So what my plan was, just to back that up, Tony, of course, knowing this audience, I said in one of my other presentations that knowing your audience is the most important piece. And I love what you just said, because my plan was to share these ideas in a way that would impact your writing, as in this group's writing. And of course, I would love to break that down and go into any discussion relative to how you might address this with your students. I don't expect that, like, and just to be clear, pipe writing doesn't change that much for a beginner pipe writer all the way through to an advanced pipe writer in terms of what basically or fundamentally is true. The only thing that changes is, of course, intensity, speed, and skill, right? Those things change. So if you guys want to do pipe, which it kind of looks like I did, I'm getting, let's see, I've got, Tony went for option 3, which would be dope. I'd love to do that with you guys. 1 for pipe. That's 1 option 3, 1, 2 for pipe. There's a 1 or 2. Option 3. Wow. We are like really close. 1, 2. It looks like pipe is probably the consensus, and I would love to come back on and do either of the other 2 presentations for you guys at a later time. So why don't we go with pipe? The masses have spoken, and let's get into this. So this is going to be informal. I did not prepare a PowerPoint for you guys. I'm treating this I wanted to treat this a little bit like what it's like to be hired as maybe a trainer or a national team member or a consultant, and you show up and they say, we want you to talk about pipe. So that's what we're going to do. Sound fair? And by all means, you do not have to mute. I don't care if I hear you chewing sounds or your dog barking. It doesn't bother me at all. What I am going to do is see if I can get into a screen share here, and we'll go into some video and start framing this up. So let me see. Sorry, my desktop may be a little messy, and you guys are just going to have to deal with it, man. Go over here. Look at this. I had all these big snow things lined up for you guys. Let's get into pipe. And let's look. There's Toby Miller's mouth. That's a good one. Let's go with, I think I've got a full pipe, just like a lower level pipe run in here that might work really well to address what Tony was talking about. Let's try this one. Okay, you guys ready? It's kind of seizing up on me. I don't know how it's working for you guys.
And hey, Chris.
You guys see it okay?
Yeah, it's coming back.
Okay. Okay, you guys don't have to memorize anything. I want you to watch it a little bit and just get your head in the pipe, the world of pipe writing. And we're going to go through a handful of critical tactics and understandings that I go through with my students. And this can be an open discussion by all means. So just stay positive and don't take anything as an absolute from me. Okay, this is just stuff that I share, and I wanted to share it with you guys. Okay, so primary areas of focus for learning the pipe, and I'm going to ask a question to you guys. You guys can throw out your answers randomly. Feel free to type them in the chat. Where do writers generate the most speed efficiently in the pipe? So where do they effectively and efficiently generate the most speed? Where do you guys think that comes from? And I'll give you some examples. Is it the line they take across the flat bottom? Is it pumping in the up tranny? Is it doing something in the down tranny? Is it how the line they exit the pipe at? What do you guys think would be maybe the dominant that stands out? Go.
I'd maybe say what they're doing in the flat bottom.
Flat bottom. So the angle of attack across the flat bottom. So like you got the flat bottom angle of attack.
Yeah,
that's a speed generator. Okay. Anyone else? No other thoughts?
Yeah, I put line in the vert, and when I say vert, I mean how much, like, where are they in the vert? What do they do when they're in the vert? Are they like, are they over in the vert? Are they landing below the vert? Are they landing high in the vert?
Interesting. And 80, you said line. I saw that one. What do you mean by line? You have to unmute.
It was similar to what Tony just said. The line they're taking across the flat bottom and then up the wall.
So line across the flat bottom and up the wall through the vert. Okay, so, and Tony, were you talking about, and you said in the vert, so you're talking about up and down or just where they land?
Yeah, well, I said line and vert. So line meaning line more down the pipe, and vert meaning what they do, like how well they control their edging in that vert zone, so that they don't lose any speed in the vert zone. Or
Are you talking about when they land or when they're
yeah,
climbing?
when they land.
Okay, so what they do when they land. Okay, cool. Any other thoughts on that? And don't feel like, I hope you guys know this is a safe place. This is a very safe place. There are no bad ideas. There are no bad answers.
But Kevin, you said down tranny, so I'm assuming pumping the down tranny.
Yeah, he's talking about down training. Kevin Bentley knows my answer. He knows what I teach my athletes, because I've been working with Kevin a little bit. But so let's get into that. So there are
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Kevin.
Well, the reason I say down tranny versus line, because what happens is if I keep the same line, typically my speed shouldn't change. If the angle of attack doesn't change, the speed shouldn't change. I should stay pretty consistent, just like in a normal carve. However, there's two spots where we actively try and generate speed: the down tranny and the up tranny. Right? We pump both of those. Some people pump one or the other, more or a little less. If you watch Shaun White, he generates so much energy on the down tranny where it looks like by the time he gets to the tranny, it looks like he's shot across the flat bottom like a rocket.
Yeah.
And then the Geronimo kid does the same thing.
Yeah. Ayumi does the same thing. In fact, most of those guys arrive there intuitively. So what they've learned, and this is what riders learn through confidence, time, experience, all those things. And I'll preface this by saying that carving and learning how to engage an edge early in a carve is maybe the most important thing you can do for your pipe riding, hands down. There probably isn't anything more important than this, although there are other very important factors, right? There are other skills and movements you have to develop, but the ability to engage the edge. Envision yourself like this, all right? So everybody just get visual, right? You're riding across a blue run. You know, you're at a big wide open run. We're in the Rockies here, so let's just go like we're at Copper and we're coming down. There's that big main run where you're not supposed to go fast, but underneath the American Eagle chair. You guys probably know the name of that run. It's got pretty good pitch down through the center of it, just above where the pipe is. There's a nice long stretch, right? You're cruising across that, straight across, perpendicular to the fall line. And then you initiate a carved turn. And the question I'll ask you is, when does the greatest amount of intensity happen for you in that carve? And for most people, honestly, most riders, it's towards the belly or the bottom half of the carve. That's where most people get engaged. Is that a fair statement? Anybody agree with that? I mean, just in general, right? Because we're dealing with speed that develops and momentum. We're trying to redirect that momentum, and it's really, really hard. The best thing that you can do is learn how to create the most intensity, the most edge angle, the craziest amount of commitment and effort into a carve in the top half. So right from the initiation, before the center of that turn, before the true belly, middle of that turn. And as you do that, you'll start to understand that that's the same commitment that you have to put to the down tranny of the pipe. So this is an incredibly important skill. And the riders who do this well, and there's very few, actually. There are very few that in the high level world that understand this. And when we take beginners into the pipe, and as you're learning to ride the pipe, oftentimes we tend to celebrate things that don't lead to this skill development, and that's a kind of a challenge. And so there are several drills that I do with introductory riders in the pipe that lead to down tranny edge engagement. So, and I think Tony was saying this is spot on. It's like, what are we doing with our edge when we land? And this is so important. It's not just about changing edges mid-flight. It's about then being able to do something on that edge that changes the outcome. And so let's look at turn shape as well. So I'll ask you this question. This is an open question to the group. Where should turn shape happen in the half pipe? Down tranny, flat bottom, up tranny. What do you guys think? Where should the line be adjusting, shaping a turn in the half pipe? Down tranny, flat bottom, up tranny. Does that make sense? Is that a reasonable question for the group? If anybody's like, hey, this is weird, just say so.
I'm going to go with up tranny.
Up tranny, turn shape happening in up tranny. Okay, interesting. And which way, Conrad?
Well, up the pipe to make the turn shape smaller, or down the pipe to make the turn shape bigger.
Okay, so you're talking about actively engaging the edge in the up tranny. Okay, interesting.
Well, yeah, more or less.
More or less. Okay.
Yeah.
And anyone else?
Yeah, I agree with what KB said. Down tranny, you kind of set your line through the down tranny and then send it through.
Yep. Okay, fair. Very good. Anyone else? There are a lot of people. Go ahead. Did I hear someone talking?
No, I'm just saying everybody else down tranny, down tranny.
Down tranny, down tranny. Right. So where we should see the most shape in our turns, there's really two places where we should see truly distinct effects on turn shape or the line. One, and this is you guys all nailed it, it's down tranny. So down tranny is where we're literally trying to carve a turn. And so if you look at a pipe rider's run, maybe I can take Toby's run back here just a little bit. I wonder if I can, nope, it doesn't do that. It won't let me just walk through. But maybe I can stop it right here. Okay, so Toby's goal in that drop-in has to be to land with his board pointed as much towards the bottom of the pipe, not the flat bottom, but the actual bottom of the pipe downhill as humanly possible. And the reason why is because that allows him to engage the edge incredibly hard. The more he points the board down towards the bottom of the pipe, the more he can engage the edge and commit to more turn shape in the down tranny. The more turn shape he creates in the down tranny, the more acceleration he will get out of the down tranny. And that is to say that turn shape is not a skidded turn. This is a carved turn, much like envision that early carve that we talked about on a blue run, cruising across, hammering that edge early. Think about just the top half of that carve. So we just got crossing to here, to the fall line, right? Just this top half. If you were to practice that, and I actually make my athletes do this, if you were to practice doing that turn, hammering down on your edge as hard as you can to the fall line, and then snapping your base to flat right at the fall line and running as hot as you can for as far as you need to until you recover and slow down, you'll start to get what that acceleration feels like in the pipe. And this is really important. It's really important for managing the shape of the turn. Now, if we take this back to Tony's point, we can't just go deep into the highest end, right? Because this is when you have the confidence and the ability to run an edge clean and to engage. However, when we take it back to the lower level rider, one of my favorite, okay, I have a few drills that I love. Okay, so one, for new riders in the pipe, I love to take them to the bottom of the pipe and hike the bottom of the pipe. And there are certain pipes where, and in Colorado, notoriously, those bottoms of the pipes are actually very difficult zones. In other regions of the country, you go to a pipe and the bottom of the pipe is nobody's there, and the pipe tails off very gently. So when I have that tailing off effect on a flatter pipe, say it's 16 to 17 degrees with a pipe rider, I'll take them to the bottom and I teach them how to drop in from the bottom. So deck drop from the bottom where it's much shorter wall, all the way down to where it's maybe hip high is where they might enter. And the goal being that they learn how to run parallel to the lip and then enter and hit the edge and run across. And so again, this requires that they have some carving skill. Now, prior to that, that's where I like riders to get to. And it's a fun drill, and people fall down and they figure out how to lock an edge in without entering the pipe, pivoting first and pointing straight across the pipe and trying to get on that edge. Because if we point straight across the pipe, we really can't engage our edge in the down tranny very much. If we do, we will overcorrect the line and be running too straight across the flat bottom, which means no speed. So what people tend to do when they pivot on entry is they tend to run on a flat base, and then they hit their edge real hard in the flat bottom, which creates some problems. Now, with my newer riders, what I like to do is I call it like 1,000 turns drill, and I'll take them into the pipe, and the mission is to do completed turns in the pipe with a really unique kind of approach to it. And what I'll do is I'll teach them to climb the pipe wall. Is this okay? Are you guys okay with this information? Is this helpful? Just want to make sure I'm going down a path that you guys appreciate. I like to teach them to climb the pipe wall until they start to stall out. At that point, just as they're feeling that deceleration happening, I want you guys to envision starting in a beginner turn. We tell beginners all the time to flatten the nose of the board through pressure, all those things, right? I teach my new students to flatten the nose of the board, just like they're initiating a beginner turn. So the nose flattens. They fade until their board is about, just shy of maybe parallel to the lip. Lip is here. Their board is kind of like that. And that's where I teach them from a very tall stance, right? So they rise as they fade. That's where I teach them to drop to their new edge and try to engage the new edge with as much intensity as possible, and then rip through to a straight line across the flat bottom. And their goal is to get to a very straight line through the flat bottom, very perpendicular, to keep their speed down. And by doing this, this allows them to cheat that wall a little bit and learn how to drop to a new edge. It's a really important drill. And even I'll do this with high-end riders as well that never learn these mechanics. Louis Vito would be an example of that. I had to slow him way down and then get him to a point where he was going so slow that he was frustrated because he couldn't just do what he was used to. And so every rider has to have that really fundamental skill of being able to drop down onto a new edge. So a down weighting movement. I think most of us would call that down and weighting or a retraction turn and all these different names, but let's just think about intent. The intent is to get the mass to move down over the edge towards the bottom, towards the bottom of the tranny. So towards the down tranny into the flat bottom. And by doing that, they're creating momentum, hammering down onto the edge, which will help them engage that edge and do a lot of really good things for them. Tracking so far, are we good? So I'm going to back it up a little bit and just go, all right, the things that I teach my athletes and all my riders, this is any pipe rider that I've ever worked with. And I'm talking from a person who has only snowboarded a couple of days to a person who has been snowboarding for a long time to some of the best athletes on the planet. I first make sure that we have a very clear and simple syntax that we can share, right? Just a way to communicate that's very clear. So, and and this may be the same for all of us. So I may be preaching to the choir, and just smirk at me if I'm talking, if you feel like I'm talking down to you, I don't mean to. I talk about the deck. I talk about the lip, right? I talk about the vert. I talk about the down tranny, talk about the flat bottom. I talk about the up tranny. I talk about the vert, again, the lip and the deck, right? And the reason why I make sure I communicate in terms of down tranny and up tranny is because I use that language a lot, because I'm talking about, hey, we're doing this in the up tranny, we're doing this in the down tranny. I also use the language of, excuse me, down pipe and up pipe. And that language is so critical to making sure that when I say, I want you to point your board more down pipe, they don't confuse that with across the pipe. Fair enough? And I like to have a very clear way to communicate those things, because then it just gets really simple. Toby Miller and I have been riding together for so long now that when I tell him to adjust, to create more power in his down tranny, and I tell him that he's rotating, he's over finishing his turn in the air too much, so he's not getting any juice out of his down tranny, he goes, oh, okay. So he'll even say to me, so you want me to point my nose more down tranny before, or more down pipe when I land? I'm like, yep, that's it. Less up pipe, less across pipe, more down pipe, and then edging in the down tranny more. So we have a language that works. And, back to the elements. So we're talking about generating speed. And one of the most important things, and it's funny because a lot of people, we take riders into the pipe, and of course it's fine to experience the pipe, but it's really, really important that from the very beginning stages that you work on drills that will lead to these outcomes. The mission should be these outcomes, because otherwise people get enough skill to go in there, try it a few times, and eventually they get vibed out because the speed, because the amplitude, because it's icy. I mean, skidded turns in the half pipe are scary as hell, especially when it's icy. It's gnarly, right? And it just doesn't feel right. I mean, anybody trying to catch an edge in a down tranny with any kind of speed, they're not going to hook up. It's not going to feel great. And then you look at a pro rider and they seem to love having that icy firm pipe, and they do. Icy firm pipe is consistent. It's like skateboarding. It's more consistent. It's easier to follow. A couple other things to talk about. And this pipe right here, that was Mammoth. A couple things that always happen in half pipes is you get something called a curb, right? Which usually forms down at the bottom of the pipe when there's a bad cut. And that comes from the pipe implement not lining up with the flat bottom pass. So when they do their final pass in the flat bottom, or when they cut with the Zog, the pipe cutter, they just leave a little ledge. You get a curve, it creates a bump. It's gnarly. Everybody hates it. Some people also will talk about coping. So coping can be when the lip of the pipe gets rounded off, right? A lot of riders will talk about something called oververt. Oververt is something that's very specific to a feeling. It's not actually a reality. The pipe cutter it would be almost impossible to cut a pipe to actually oververt. So if you ever hear that term or you've used that term, it's just because that pipe has maybe a more extended vert or it's closer to vertical than you're used to. Most pipes are cut around 83 to 85 degrees at the vert, which is really important to understand. When they get pushed up to say 87, 88, 89, close to that vert range, then people get real scared of them. And pipe riders start to feel like they're getting thrown back in. When it goes below 83 degrees, they start to deck out more. And that's where they run into all kinds of problems, right? So just understanding those mechanics. The pipes, most pipes now, modern pipes are cut on a 17.5 to an 18.5, even in some cases 19 degrees on the slope. So the parent slope of the pipe is for a 22-foot pipe has to be 17.5 or better. Otherwise, it'll just run so slow, no one will be able to carry speed. Slow pipes are actually a lot of fun because you get to be overconfident in your drop in and you're going to run out of speed, but they're really tough to train. So just to get the little background there, a little setup for discussion. Right now, I'm going to throw this at you. Look at Toby's board. Where is his board pointed relative to up pipe or down pipe? Did he drop in and point across the pipe, or did he drop in and point down pipe? I froze it in a pretty good spot. Can you guys see it okay?
Down.
Let me see if, oh, look, I can back it up one frame at a time. This is awesome. You ready? Sorry, I'm learning as I go. Okay, so he hasn't landed yet. Let's see. He's landing right there. Down pipe, right? Now, here's the next question. How engaged is his edge at landing? This is a really important question. Highly engaged. I mean, he just touched down right there. Let's see how long it takes for him to engage. You guys tell me when you think he's really engaging that edge. I'm slowing down because I'm seeing it. Anybody else see what I see? Edge
back up about a frame or two.
Yeah.
Go forward about another frame or two, and you'll see the high edge angle create, and you'll see
right there.
Right about right there. Yeah. You see the edge angle now, especially out of the front foot. That edge he's really on that edge on the lead foot there, and his tail is still relatively flat, but that front half of his board has a high edge angle right now.
He's starting to engage right there. Now that's late for Toby. Just to be clear, that's late, and he's doing that because he's trying to go small on his first hit. And this was a couple years ago, and we were trying to work on some pretty specific things in the Mammoth pipe on a crummy day with curbs in the pipe and all kinds of stuff. And he wanted to work on amplitude on his front side wall and consistency and a couple other things. So on his first hit, he was using it as a setup hit. And what you'll see is when he does his setup hits, he kind of is lazy and he slows everything down. He gets later, and the later he gets, generally speaking, the less power he generates through the bottom of the down tranny. And the bottom of the down tranny is incredibly important. You guys, if I can take you back to that drill where I was talking about an early edge and carving to the fall line, you guys with me on that? Right here, this is the equivalent of him being late to the edge as he enters into the turn right there, right? So he's a little late to it. He's going to just get to his edge as he's getting close to approaching what would be the fall line in that drill, what is actually in real time the bottom of the down tranny. And this is really important. So for timing, for any of you trying to grow your skill and build to a place where you're confident to flow out of the pipe, you're going to have to learn how to hammer the edge and get the hell off of it just where the pipe, where the down tranny starts to meet the flat bottom. It's so important to get your work done before you get to the flat bottom. And Tony said something, and I think 80 was hinting at something, and it might have been some others. Even Kevin said something about line and being consistent. What most people do, this is where most people fail. And I'll bet, Tony's seen this, Chris has probably seen this in plenty of exams. If they do not get to that edge early enough and get their work done and get their line shaped in the down tranny, they will be fighting their line across the flat bottom and into the up tranny, which causes all kinds of issues, right? So this is a really important takeaway, I think, for anybody who's trying to grow their skills in the pipe. If you are not getting enough work done in the down tranny, meaning that you pivoted when you entered, for example, and you're pointed straight across the pipe instead of down the pipe, you're not getting on edge, you're not shaping a turn in the down tranny, and you're not getting to the angle of attack that you want across the flat bottom before you hit the bottom of the down tranny. If that's not happening, then what's going to happen to you is you're going to be pointed straight too steep down the flat bottom, right? So down and across, I guess, steep like this instead of flatter. And then you're going to be fighting when you hit that up tranny, because of that steep angle across. When you hit the up tranny, you're going to rail hard into the up tranny, causing a lot of loading, all kinds of mechanical issues in your stance, and disabling your ability to release and flow into your turn, which is going to make that pipe, especially an icy pipe, you're going to feel like if you ride an icy pipe at Copper, you know, in January or February when it's real cold and you're trying to ride an edge through the vert, it's going to feel awful. It'll feel terrible. But when you learn how to get the line right at the bottom of the down tranny, the up tranny doesn't even exist. The up tranny just feels like you're on a rail because you're hardly edging. Your angle of attack is right, and your momentum has been redirected early enough that you're not trying to redirect momentum up the pipe as you go up the tranny. So does that make sense? So this is a bit abstract, and I'll show you what I mean here. Oops, sorry. Did the weird thing again. So watch Toby's line. Right there. Did you guys see how he kind of hammers? It looks like he pumps right here. A lot of people confuse this with a pump. Right there, you can see his legs extended. That's just him coming back on top of his board, and he's done shaping his line. Watch him as he goes across flat bottom. He will not change his line much at all if he does anything. So he's just holding a very consistent edge right there. Now right there, do you see him dip down on his edge a little bit? See him sink right here? That's him cheating speed because he doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to run. So when you look at this little move, right? He sets the edge a little harder right there, blows his tail out a little bit, and he's skidding right there because he didn't do enough work in the down tranny, right? And all of a sudden, that line that he thought he had, that he was holding, he's like, oh shit, that's not the right line. So now he adjusts. He sets the edge hard. He's going to skid a little bit, and he's straightening his line across the flat bottom as he climbs into the up tranny. He's a good rider, so he'll adjust, right? That was an adjustment he just made. There he released it, right? And now he's going to let it flow. And if you watch all the way up this wall, there's going to be almost no edge angle. He's not flat based, just to be clear, but there's almost no edge angle at all, right? He's doing something that's really important. I'm going to get into a couple of high level things here at some point about how we release in the up tranny, but I just want to talk about line for the time being. So you see, he made that adjustment right here because he didn't like his line and he wanted to slow down. He didn't want to run down pipe. He wanted to kill his speed because he knew if he ran down pipe, then he'd be going really big into his second hit, which he didn't want. He was trying to control things. You guys with me so far? Everybody okay with this? Yep. And by all means, please be off mute and just say, hey, I have a question as we go through, because I can't see everybody's face right now.
Hey, real quick, Chris.
Yeah,
so
go ahead, Adi.
You didn't want to go up too fast into the up tranny because he's trying to do something?
He wanted to slow down because he didn't want to go big. This was a training run, and I was pushing him, but it was windy. And Toby, one of Toby's big things is he talks a lot about whenever it's windy. Ever since he's been a little guy, he'll talk about how scary the wind is. So whenever it's windy, he wants to slow down. And that day he felt safer pushing hard on the front side wall than he did on the back side wall. And it's normal. I'm not trying to belittle him in any way. This is real. This is what he really feels. It's a psychological impact that wind has. So
you're saying a lot of, oh, sorry.
Yep. Go ahead.
You're saying a lot of the adjustment of line choice is happening more in the flat bottom. You set up on the down tranny, you make adjustments through the flat bottom, and then you kind of let it let it go in the up tranny?
Yeah, so most people make the mistake of making adjustments in the flat bottom. It's a mistake. If you're adjusting the flat bottom, it's because you didn't get your line right in the down tranny. So kind of burn that one in and know that every time you've ever had to edge to straighten your line out to go into the up tranny, or every time you feel like you're going too slow, that it's too late, right? If you're going too slow, it's just too late. But if you're edging as you come into the up tranny or just before, towards the second half of the flat bottom, that's because you're realizing intuitively, your brain is telling you that you're going too steep down and across the flat bottom. So your brain is telling you to straighten out before you hit the up tranny. And so then what happens is, because you're late, you'll be over edging through most of the up tranny. And then you'll see a lot of pro riders, by the way, a lot of them do this. They'll edge real hard and then they'll let off somewhere in the up tranny. And they're like, oh, I got it. And then they got to let go. They're strong enough to compensate and it still works very well. But it's not the most effective riding. So what you want to do when you're looking at riding and learning riding for yourself and how you're going to push yourself towards, whatever it is, climbing to the vert, lipping out, airing consistently down the pipe, you're going to want to get an image of what close to perfect looks like. And for female riders, Chloe Kim, by far. Kelly Clark, no. Kelly Clark's incredibly strong, but her accuracy with edge work is not the same as Chloe's. Chloe's near perfect on her accuracy, whereas Kelly is just strong enough and confident enough to go way harder. So two very different styles of riding. Look at how they work their edges. In terms of pipe, Ayumu, Toby, Sean, for sure. Sean, I mean, most of the pipe knowledge that I have comes from just studying hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of Sean White. And so, it's funny, when I coached him just for a short time, it was like all these years of nerding out on his pipe riding. And then I'm actually coaching the guy that I've been using as the main template for a lot of my coaching.
Hey,
Pretty
interesting. I'll
interesting.
just ask you to move Toby a couple frames forward, just
You
as
got it, bud.
Slowly into tranny. And I just want to point something out.
Yeah, by all means. So there's that adjustment. Right now we're going into tranny right here.
Yeah, right here. Just chill for a second. So
Yeah, you got it.
The reason I want to point something out is I did a clinic years ago with John Casson. I don't know if you know John, but
I know John. Yeah.
And we were talking about pipe riding, and Mike and I just had a conversation a second ago. Mike just brought something up as well. And we were just talking about how people will get into funky positions in managing force, right? And some, like you said, Kelly's got a freakishly strong body. She can do stuff that most women, when she was competing, couldn't do the same, right? So it looks ugly, but it's producing performance. So like you look at Toby here, and some instructors, from an instructor lens, might be like, oh, he's broken at the waist, right? Like that would come up. But what he's able to do, and that, I look at that as like counterbalancing, creating power and force, and he's using a larger lever with a smaller lever to manage more forces and stuff like that. So, but the thing is he's doing a lot of this by feel, because he knows where it's right and where it's wrong. And that's something where, when you get into the coaching world, you coach by feel. An athlete feels something, they talk to the coach. The coach sees something, he asks the athlete if he feels something, right? That's how that communication a lot goes. We don't get that much as we're instructors and trainers, because we're dealing with people when they get in there, the fear overcomes them. So they don't know what they're supposed to feel. It feels so absolutely different than anything we get out on the run. That's why when people go in the pipe, they're like, oh my God, the wall is so icy, right? And because you don't feel a wall at freaking whatever degrees it is, at 80 degrees out on a groomed run, that's icy. Because if you did, you'd be on your ass all day long, right? So my point is that, like, it's funny, because when you talk to Ben, to Boydie as well all the time, he's like, man, every time I see a cert group come through the pipe, you guys are trying to get everybody to ride in alignment. That's bullshit, and so on and so forth. And like, let's do this and let's do. And it's like, well, hold on, you're teaching people to go massive, and they got to deal with a whole different force than what we're trying to keep people on their damn feet, right? So like, so when you get into things like edging and perpendicularity and managing forces, like, it's a little bit different world. And how do you turn that on and off when you're coaching versus teaching and training?
Yeah. So for me, and this is just total honesty, it all looks the same to me. So if I look at a brand new pipe rider, or I look at Toby Miller, I see the exact same person, just at a different place in time. And I have a very clear pathway. So if you ever get to ride with me in the pipe, if that's something you want to do ever, just let me know and I'll make time for you. Come out to Hood in the summer and there's pipe. But when I work with a rider, I identify some very specific things that I either see that they've never learned or they don't understand. And then I start working towards them through a whole bunch of drills. And I don't have enough time to even get into all the drills, but I would love to do that for you guys. But nothing changes. I have a 14-year-old now athlete who I just taught this next skill that I'm going to share with you. But this is the same skill that we even teach beginners. And I'm going to have you guys right now, if it's cool, just have you stand up, because this has been a real cerebral discussion so far. And hopefully this is helping. And if it's not, by all means, just say, hey, I got a question, and throw it out there. But what I want you guys to do with me is I want you to imagine, okay, that you're on your snowboard, and go ahead and find some place where, I'm going to back up. Find a place where you can balance against something, like you're, supporting a heel side turn, and get balanced so you're on your heels, right? Your toes are up off the ground. You're on your heels, because you're not going to be able to see me very well. All right. Let me see if I can angle down. Maybe you can see my feet and my lower legs there. Can you guys see my feet okay? Go ahead and just somebody shout out so I can hear you.
Yeah, I've got you.
Okay. So now, can you see that both my knees and ankles are flexed and my toes are off the ground? Everybody see that? Do that with me. Just do a little exercise here. Just getting that squat, and go ahead and tip your shoulders forward. Don't try to be upright. As Tony said, you got to flex at the hips when we ride the half pipe. It's just part of the deal. Now I want you guys to watch a really specific move. I'm left foot forward. This is my front foot. Now, as Toby climbs the pipe, he does something that I taught him when he was 7, 8 years old. He makes this move right here. Can you guys see that move?
Can you do it again?
Yeah, you ready? And I'll do it from an angle. Let's see. I know it's hard trying to find spots here. Okay, you guys ready? Can you guys see my legs and feet? Watch the move. Watch my left leg. Can you see that move?
Yep.
Okay, so try it right now. I want you to flex, keep both toes up. I want you to flex the ankle of your lead leg more than your rear. Look at your lower leg. The lower leg of your lead leg should be tipping more towards the toes than your rear, but both toes are still up off the ground. Can you guys see that and feel that?
So that's what center mass drops down right before.
So go ahead and say that again.
Is that why center mass drops down right before the uptrend?
It is. So what he's learned is this really important move where he's still tipping on his heels, in this case, right? But he's flattening the nose while still engaging the edge. Now think about that. So he's twisting his board just like we would teach a beginner to twist their board to initiate a turn. And he's going to do that as he climbs that pipe wall. And by doing so, I want you to think about this. So here's my hands. If he was doing the opposite, if he was lifting his lead toes more than his rear, his board would try to climb up the wall. Does that make sense? He'd be telling his nose to climb, and he'd actually be, because his tail's flatter, in this case, flatter than the nose, he'd be telling his tail to wash out, which, by the way, is what happens to most riders on their backside wall. So you watch, I mean, you've probably felt this yourself. Think about a backside wall where you're climbing the wall and you can feel your tail skidding out, and then you make a hard move or an uncomfortable move to try to complete the turn in the air or at the vert to get it around to the toes. You under-rotate and you have all kinds of problems. And this one move, this one understanding of how the legs work and how introductory snowboarding comes into play and is really, really important. This one move is maybe one of the most important keys to backside wall and frontside wall. And there's a big misunderstanding about how to create rotation in the pipe. Most of us think that a turn in the pipe has to come from, the shoulders being really active and creating rotation, and the board follows the rotation of the upper body. This is just simply not the case. It doesn't have to happen that way unless you're making a hopped like 180 turn, like where you're going full 180. even beginners, if you go back to that drill I talked to you guys about where I told you I have my new riders, I have them climb until they start to stall out. Then I have them fade the nose. Then I have them drop down onto the new edge. They don't need a ton of rotation in that drill. So I teach that turn for introductory turns in the pipe versus climb up, rotate the shoulders, and retract and make the board follow the shoulders kind of move. That creates too much rotation in the pipe, and it leads to problems down the road. So if I have this new rider in the pipe or a pro rider who, by the way, most pro riders aggressively over rotate their upper body into their turns because in their head, rotation is a part of every turn, but it's really not. All we have to do is learn to release that lead foot, the nose flattens by tipping. Think of your legs like joysticks. The lead leg tips more towards the new edge than the rear while we still stay on that consistent edge. So in this case, we're on his heel side edge. His lead leg has to tip more towards the toes than the rear does while he holds that edge. And by doing so, he will naturally start to climb without fighting the wall. The wall will no longer fight him because he's not trying to turn and carve back up the pipe. He's going with the wall and he's going to move down the pipe. Also, he'll get this really cool effect. And I'll try to show you. If you guys watch really closely as he gets to the vert, you can see, look at the angle of his line. See how it's starting to go down the pipe? It's naturally just going. He's not just flattening. He's literally doing what we just practiced. Now, when you watch a pipe rider at a high level, remember I said there's two places where you'll see turn shape in a pipe? Two places where you want to see turn shape. First, down tranny. That's where all the power. Down tranny carve, all the power. Up tranny, on the way out through the vert, you will see another bit of turn shape, as Conrad alluded to a while back, by what most people would think of as flattening, but I think of as twisting, and using the lower legs to do so while still maintaining the edge. We're not letting go of the edge. We're riding the edge all the way through the lip. We stay on the heel side edge all the way through the lip. We never go flat base, right? We're committed to the heels in this case, but by flattening the nose a little more than the heels, we get what I always refer to as a reverse carve. So instead of carving back up the pipe, the board starts to look like it carves the wrong direction. If you think about it, the heel side edge is meant to, in this case, is meant to go that way. And in that reverse carve, he'll leave a track through the vert that's going that way, the opposite direction, because he's twisted the board and it's allowing that board to release. Does that make sense? I know it's kind of sciencey and nerdy. And if you guys have a question, go now.
Well, essentially, you're kind of creating different edge angles within the board, but holding the edge. So you're actually not really turning while carving, but you're able to hold a straighter line. Exactly.
And so instead of the board aggressively trying to carve in its natural turn shape, by straightening, by twisting that board, I mean, you can kind of look at it. It's not exactly like this, but if this is the camber of the board, when you twist it, maybe that edge straightens out a little bit. And so it detunes the aggressive shape that the board would like to carve and allows it to travel down pipe more. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Kind of scientific and nerdy. Now let's get going. We're in the air. And I want you to notice, look at his shoulders. You tell me, does he use a lot of shoulder motion to create turn? Really none, right? They're pretty quiet. He just floats with it. Now, why did he rotate though through a full turn? It's because he released through the nose. He did what beginners do. We don't tell beginners to go out and use the bow and arrow and throw their shoulders around to make turns. And we don't want to do that in the pipe. And so I'm going to take it back and I'm going to keep trying to do this because Tony, that's a great challenge, by the way. Tony said, hey, we can't just talk about athletes, right? Not everybody's getting 5-6 foot airs in the pipe. And in this image, most of us are just working with students who may be going less than halfway up the tranny, which is, by the way, where you should stay. Get our line straight across the flat bottom for our infinite turns drill. Climb to an apex, flatten the nose through that position that we just practiced. Let the board fade to parallel with the lip, and then teach your students to drop down onto a new edge and engage it until it rails across into a straight line through the flat bottom. So in terms of pressure control, I'm going to take it back a little ways. Let's just talk about what we're doing with our stance. And you guys can stand up and do this if you like, all right? Just to get moving. Now you can't see my face. Okay, so let's go through the positions of the body relative to the down tranny the up tranny, or the flat bottom, the up tranny, okay? You guys still with me, okay? I seized. Okay, we're back. It's looking good. Make sure I've got the right. Yeah, we're doing good. Okay, so if we just talk about pressure management through it in kind of like vertical terms, up and down movement. When we land in the pipe on our drop in, for example, right? We're getting ready to go down the down tranny. We want to be low, right? When we get into the flat bottom, we're going to rise a little bit, right? That's coming out of the down tranny. So we're low. There will be a little rise, which a lot of people think of as pump. Now, as we go through the flat bottom, let's get low again. So we're low in the flat bottom, right? As we approach the up tranny, we're going to rise a little bit and hold. I want you to now tense your muscles like you're climbing the wall and you're fighting a battle. And if you don't keep your muscles tensed, the wall is just going to swallow you up and you're going to compress into it, right? So again, we'll go back to the flat bottom. We're low. We're just about to hit the up tranny.
Some of that. Oh.
We're going to rise an inch and flex and be tense. Strengthen our legs. This is how we climb the up tranny. That's all the movement we need for the up tranny. We don't need a big pump. We just need to get below, rise and hold. And now we hold in a slightly taller stance than we were in the flat bottom, right? Now here's where we get a little bit of that release. So think about that move. You're on your heels. You're going to flex the lead ankle and get that lead shin to tip forward, which is going to cause your hip and shoulder to rotate into the turn. And now once we fade, we wait for the board to skid. We're all beginners. We're waiting. We're going slow. It's skidding, skidding, skidding. Then we're going to drop into our turn. You guys see that? So let's do it together. We're going to do a backside air one more time. We're in the flat bottom. We're low. We hit the up tranny. We rise and hold. We start to release the nose and our body, our hip and shoulder rotate as we release the nose because of that position, right? We wait for it to fade and we drop into the turn. Once we land, we engage the new edge and we repeat the process. So you guys come back to your chairs. Yeah, me too, 80. I want to ride the pipe right now. I'm so freaking frustrated. So think about that. If you just visualize that, we're low in the flat bottom. We rise and hold in the up tranny. We release the nose through proper edge work, torsional flex, pressure control. Our hips and shoulders rotate into the lead, but we're not aggressively rotating. We let the board fade. Then we drop onto the new edge and we go. Does that make sense? So that's the beginner application. Toby's doing exactly the same thing. Watch the video. Let me back it up a little ways, okay? I'll just go in slow motion for you guys, if that's cool. Here we go. Now he's low, rise and hold. See the rise and hold? Release. And at the top, because he's airing out, he's not fading to parallel, right? But he did fade a little bit. So he does the exact same thing I just told you guys. Here it is. Right there is where he's fading. That's where he's releasing the nose. He's redirecting his board down the pipe right there. And then all he has to do, because he's managed the pressure all the way through, he hasn't increased it. He's not jumping. There's no hard extension. There's no pop. He's not absorbing. He's just holding with all that tension. And now he's going to release and pluck his knees up towards his chest. Just boing. Rebound energy does all the work for him, right? He's not, and he stays right with the wall because he didn't push aggressively. What happens to most people is they hit the bottom, they hit the flat bottom or the bottom of the up tranny. They compress, they get loaded, and then they go to the vert and get bucked, and then they're popping off the wall. This happens to a lot of people, by the way. What Toby's doing is he's low. He rises and holds right at the base of the up tranny, rides it out, fades his nose a little bit, and just goes pluck and floats. And he doesn't jump. He's just gotten, because he's gotten a little tall, all he has to do is pull his knees to him. Now he's got all that freedom to float, and he's going to land and repeat. Make sense?
Yeah. I heard this from, I think it was Nick Alfieri, his roommate, who was an instructor as well as a coach. They were talking about why so many people within the AASI world reduce the kind of trouble that reasons, because we do teach a lot of absorption with so many other aspects of riding. It's like absorb this, absorb bumps. But with the pipe, they're so used to absorbing any sort of transition rather than staying firm that they lose a lot of amplitude.
That's right. That's exactly right. And also it's really hard to stay firm if your line isn't right, because if you stand strong on an edge with your board pointed too steep down the flat bottom, when you hit the up tranny, it's going to wash out on you. It won't hold. So the line has to be right from the down tranny. Then we've got to be in the right position through the flat bottom so that we can rise and create energy and hold it. And we've got to be releasing that nose so the board will naturally fade. Then we're in really good shape. Now, this can be learned from beginner right on through. Beginner is just much slower, staying below the midway on the tranny, and we're doing the exact same thing: a straight line across the flat bottom, rise, hold, fade, release, and reset the edge. So I always teach it's kind of like a rhythm, and you can practice this just turning. So if you go out onto a groomer, you can practice low as you go across the perpendicular fall line, across the slope. Then you can rise and hold for a second. Then you can practice that little fade position, and then you can drop into the new edge as you approach the fall line. It's a really fun way just to simplify that and burn the movements in your brain. Okay.
Hey Chris, can you let it run on his landing?
You got it, man. I was just about to do that. So right here.
Awesome. So I got a quick question.
Oh, shoot.
That's why I noticed something. So I know I'm guilty of this, so I'll speak about myself. But a lot of times, when we're airing out and we land on either edge, right, whether it's our drop in or we've aired out and we land, a lot of times what we do, or what I do, is I start to point my board across the pipe instead of down the pipe.
Yep.
Which then makes it hard to really drop 250 on that edge. But what I'm noticing Toby do here is he's not, when he lands, his board is still kind of down the pipe. I don't want to say he under rotates a little, but he's landing a little less than full rotation. So when he drops down, it really grabs that edge. Is that what's happening here?
Amen, brother. Because I teach him to under rotate. I have since he was 7 years old. So I've never called it under rotating. I've always called it landing pointed down pipe. Other coaches will call it under rotating, and that's fine. But you're rotating enough. It's not under rotating. This is the right amount of rotation, which is, by the way, when we talk about rotation, talk about what the board does, relative to the arcing trajectory versus rotating the body. If we are rotating the body a ton in the half pipe, we are doing something wrong. I want you guys to recognize that. The only time we want to rotate the body a lot is when we're trying to make a spin happen. We never have to rotate the body hard in the pipe. If you're rotating the body hard in the pipe, it's probably because you over-edged, got locked out on an edge, and then you got to try to get that board all the way around. So you're going to whip it real hard and use your upper body to do that. And this is where we're about to get into the other side. And just to go on what Kevin said, look at that angle of landing. It's friggin' pier. And look at how small he is. Remember I said you got to be small when you land on the down tranny? Now watch what happens. Right there, he's going to dig right there. He's digging into the meat of the down tranny, and there's the release. Do you guys see that powerful edge engagement to a release? Way easier to do on the toe side than on the heel side. So a lot of people love their toe side, but I work with my athletes to make their heel side, their backside drop and their backside wall, their power wall, because it's so damn hard to feel confident when you don't have your ankle doing what it normally does in a jump shot, for example. We don't get to use our toes. It's weird. And it's very important. And one of the best things you guys can do at home is grab a yoga ball, put it behind your back, and do wall squats. So just kind of roll, like squat down. And as you roll down, lift your toes off the ground like you're dropping into the pipe. And practice is a really cool thing. You just kind of have that ball behind you. You just kind of drop down and get your toes off the ground at the same time. It'll strengthen the anterior tibials. So good for you. Really, really good stuff. All right, now here we go. We're going in the up tranny on the front side wall. We're going to get into some release mechanics on front side wall. Pressure control doesn't change. We're low. We're going to rise and hold, right? Then we're going to fade and release. Low, rise, hold, fade, release. Low, rise, hold, fade, release. Notice I'm not saying rotate. It's not a ton of rotation because I don't want you to think about rotating your body a lot. There is some. I'm not saying there's none. I'm just saying let the rotation come from what the ankles and the legs do to create this impact. Now there's Toby's rise, right? He's holding. Now look at that. This is really important. Really important. Look at his shoulders. Toby is doing something that at that training session, I beat out of him, because every time he goes off and rides on his own, or he rides with the US team or any of the other coaches, he gets focused on tricks and he forgets his fundamentals. Right there, he just used his shoulders a ton. He created a ton of anticipatory rotation, which he does not need. It is nonsense to do this. And what it's going to do to him in the air, generally speaking, and he'll adjust because he's that good, but for the average rider and for a new rider, let's walk it back to, and I don't mean to call instructors average. I'm very average when I look at half pipe riding, but I can ride the pipe okay. But when we look at riders who aren't pros, what happens to people when they rotate their upper body like this? Look at his back knee. Look at his front knee. He is literally telling the tail of his board to engage like crazy right now. He's getting himself locked into an edge. It's not going to release or fade as confidently as it would if he made a slight change. And in the air, the board is going to whip to match his shoulders. And then a lot of times what this does to most riders is it causes them to pop to upright, right? They go from staying, horizontal or aligned with the vert to, in this case, like this, to uprighting, and then landing on that toe side edge and then rolling to the heels really late. This happens to almost every rider I watch, especially at exams, but every new rider that ever tries to get air, because they all can hold a toe side edge and climb the front side wall pretty good. They just don't know how. They're in a position that doesn't allow them to manage and flow back to their heel side edge and comfortably move into a backside wall, because A, most people fear their backside wall, and B, the movements that they're making just won't allow it. So here's all that counter, right? All that leading rotation with the upper body. He's going to release, watch the board whip a little bit. It tries to catch up to his body, and then he regulates it because he's that good, right? Goes into a little melon grab, and he's going to under rotate it, and he's going to land pretty close to his heel side edge. What we worked on that day, I remember this day really specifically, it's like a couple years ago. We were working on eliminating the rotation of his shoulders on his front side airs, because I wanted him to learn how to release through the nose. And he already knew this. It's just like he has to be reminded, like at least once a year. It's crazy how quickly people forget this stuff, but they do. We all forget this stuff. So I want you guys to stand up again. We'll just do a little toe side drill just for fun. We did it on the heels. We might as well stand up and do it on the toes. So let me see. Get my feet. You guys can probably see my feet. I want you guys to get into that over ankle flexed position. Drive the hips forward, right? So we're holding that edge a little bit. And now I want you to think about your lead heel. So in this case, my right heel, I'm going to pretend like I'm a goofy rider. All I'm going to do is flex my right ankle, allow my right heel to drop. That's it. Now look at how much rotation that created in my hips and shoulders. Watch, take it up a little bit. Watch really closely. When all I do is think about dropping my right heel just a little bit by flexing that ankle, you can see my hip and shoulder follow suit just a little bit. There's a very small amount of rotation. And that little tiny bit of rotation is all you need if you're climbing that wall accurately. But what most people do is over engage the edge on their toe side because they can, straighten that line out, right? And get really, really hung up on it, popped up, uprighted, whippy rotation, land on the toe side edge, roll to the heels super late, feel awkward, race down at a steep angle across the flat bottom, fight their backside wall, and repeat the process all the way down the pipe. It's a really brutal process, and most people go through this. This is like the most common thing I see in pipe riding at the more intermediate level. Make sense? So if Toby was doing that right, let's see. Let's see what he does here. Way less rotation. So he's working on it. He's fighting for it, right? If you guys, I'll back this one up. Let's see how rotated he is on this one. There's less. It's still there though. Right there. And if I change videos really quick, right? Let me move the group chat here. It's find another video, maybe a more current one. How's that? Let's try that one. This looks like a full run. That was really good. That looked better at first glance. So let's just see what he looks like. That's still there, not nearly as much. So eventually, if I find a video clip of Toby where he nails it, you'll see him. Sorry, you'll see him just do nothing. See that little whip of the shoulders? So common, it detracts from him every time. This is something that costs him speed and costs him, and he weighs so little. He's a smaller guy, so he can't afford to lose any energy in his down tranny. I'm gonna keep looking. I want to find one. I bet we've got one in here. Ooh, that might have been it. If you guys have any questions while I'm playing around with video stuff, let's see. I wonder if I can, it probably won't let me zoom in. Almost none. So it's like so hard to see because he just turned into the forest right there. But in this one, he had almost none. So if you watch the anticipatory movements, you can see it right here. It's very, 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 very little, right? And so the less he does with that upper body on his front side wall, the more likely he is to be able to stay at the appropriate angle with the wall and land in the turn. Now, if we take it back to beginners, again, we're low in the flat bottom. We rise and hold. We fade the nose by dropping the lead heel, let the board fade a little ways, and then we drop down onto the heels in this case. There's no difference between that low end drill and this highest end drill. Okay. Let's go in and really quick, because I'm probably pushing well past my time, and you guys can stop me whenever you want. I'm going to talk just a tiny bit about drop-in, and then I'm going to wrap it up and let you guys go into questions, and then turn it over to Chris so he can do his thing. Really quickly here, I want you to note something about drop-in, and I'm sure most of you know this, but I see this all the time. So he is running almost parallel to the actual lip. So if I turn on annotate here real quick, let me just get a little draw. So here's the line of the lip, right? Sorry, terrible line. Through here, he's actually pretty parallel to that line. He's not coming from out here and carving in and pointed across the pipe this way, right? Does that make sense? You guys with me so far? So he's not, is my annotate thing good? Let me draw.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Just by way of hands, how many people drop in this group that we're talking to, drop in the way that you're supposing the second route, like cliff drop style?
Swing wide and point across the pipe.
Yeah, that's, hands up. How many of us actually do this? So we've got one person. And then how do you fix it?
Okay, so the first thing is you gotta put yourself in a safe space where you feel confident dropping in. So drop low on the wall, don't drop high on the wall in the beginning. But I want you guys to envision the mouth of the pipe. So if I back this up a little bit, let me see if I can get out of annotate here. If I back this up a little ways, wrong one, new video, one that shows, there we go. It's being difficult on me right now. So let's go back into Toby here. Here, this one looks like it shows the mouth of the pipe. So this is pretty good. Okay, you guys can see the mouth of the pipe. I'm gonna get into annotate again really quick. And nothing's really quick, I apologize. But here's the lip, right? That we talked about right there. And if I close this, no, stop that. Just play. Right there. Okay, so you can see his angle of approach there is just slightly angled into the pipe. He's actually trying to align with this spot right up here. He's trying to go on this line that he's drawing right here, probably through here, and he's going to aim to land higher than he took off from. So he's going to aim to land here, set his edge, and drop down. In an ideal world, he's going to create a ton of turn shape from that point on. He's riding up the mouth of the pipe and entering with full speed, full confidence. Now, if you were new and you wanted to go slow, don't start at the drop in. Don't start where everybody else. I know it's hard because everybody's going to snake you, but call your drop, slide down in as low as you need to, and pick a point where you can come to a dead stop and then point straight. And your mission is to align your board, okay, with this line right here. That line is your new best friend. You're going to pick a point that allows you to take a line like this and enter as close to that lip as possible. Now, if you want to enter here, then we get our line. And I always teach my riders to run as close to the lip as they possibly can. So the lip's here, and this is your edge. Run right up on it, man. Really close. So that all you have to do is make a little hop and then retract and try to punch on that edge. That's your mission, right? And then wherever you start from, remember, there's still down tranny right here. So we want to get to that edge and we want to shape a turn. If it's from here, we're still going to shape a turn into the bottom of the down tranny. That's our mission, is to learn that drop in. Anytime you swing out here and come in, you're killing speed, and there's no way you can land on an engaged edge. You will not land on an engaged edge of any power or prominence. It just won't work because physics won't allow it. When you're going straight through here, if you land here and try to engage the edge, it's just on the down tranny, you won't be able to feel anything. If you were to engage the edge with this approach line through here, this one, when you engage the edge in the down tranny, you're going to feel like you're going to fall over. You're probably going to turn. You're probably going to have all kinds of problems. Now, when your line enters pointed here, and then the edge engages and rips down, you can do that every single time. And so your approach has to change and your mentality has to change. You don't have to go faster. Just don't start at the top of the drop in. Go down 10 feet above where you want to roll in. So you're going very slow. Run parallel to that lip, the mouth of the pipe. I always call it the mouth of the pipe. That's where the pipe kind of enters. The low part of the mouth, run right along the shape of that mouth. So if it's rounded, fine. Follow the rounded shape. Don't take a line from way outside. Follow the rounded shape until you get a feel for this. Then you're going to air up, enter, hook that edge, and jam across as hard as you can. And that's your new mission. If you want to get good at riding a half pipe, it starts with your drop-ins. Starts with you learning that fade and release routine that I shared with you guys for beginners. It's for you too. It's for me. Just so you know, I do build-ups with this. When I warm up in the pipe, and I still go, I mean, it depends on the day, but I still go 5 to 10 feet out. But any run, any pipe I go to, I'm going to air out of the pipe at least a few inches and not be worried. I won't be comfortable. I won't be uncomfortable because I know this line so well. I know these mechanics that I've shared with you, and there's more. We just don't have enough time to go into it much deeper. What I'd like to do is open it up for just a couple minutes. If you guys have any questions, and of course, I apologize, Chris, for going over time. Thank you for your patience.
Hey, Chris, I have a question.
Yep.
At the lip of the pipe, often you see riders doing a fore-aft movement. Do you ever teach that?
Fore-aft in the pipe is very slight. It's just like skateboarding. So in skateboarding, we don't do tremendous amounts of fore-aft work, but there is some. There has to be some. There has to be pressure on the front foot and then the back foot, so I teach it more as a very small range of motion in the pipe, but I don't teach a powerful fore-aft move. Now tell me where you're reflecting it, where you're talking about specifically.
Just right when they leave the lip of the pipe.
Like to drop in?
No, going out up the tranny.
No, I don't teach really. I don't focus on fore-aft there at all. What I will do is if I have a rider who's in the back seat, of course, I'll fix that and I'll correct that. But I don't teach a dramatic shift of pressure or stance relative to the front foot, back foot in the pipe.
Okay.
Because
sometimes it's almost like they do a slight ollie or something. I don't know if anyone else has seen that before.
So You're talking about riders that actually do ollie?
I don't know if it's exactly,
tail?
they're not pushing off of the pipe per se, but they're kind of shifting up into the air more so by using a fore-aft movement.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Well, Chris, what I think she's saying, and just because I know AS really well, is that movement where you actually leave off the tail. Your tail's the last piece to leave the lip. To a lot of people, it looks like an ollie, right? But you're actually still pressuring both feet equally. It's just you're leaving off the tail versus a true ollie off that tail, which actually throws you back into the pipe.
I was literally just about to say the same thing. Well said, Kevin. Yeah, so it's just like a jump. So 80, think of it this way, like when you ride off a jump, the last thing to touch the jump should be your tail. But if you were actively pushing on that tail too hard, you'd roll forward too much. So there's this sort of physics thing that's going on there. So what I like to do is I like to envision it much like, imagine like holding a strong press all the way through, or like one thing that I'll do with my riders, with newer riders especially that are trying to figure out jumps and figure out pop and things like that, is sometimes I'll have them stand, I'll just get them up on like a flat surface and have them hang their nose and as much of their board off of that thing as possible, and then slowly work their way through the tail, learning how to maintain balance, just pressure and stability through the tail, because that's all we're really trying to do. We want to feel pressure all the way through. And I said we don't go flat base in the pipe. I should correct that. We do go flat base in the pipe at the lip. When the tail is the last thing touching the lip, the whole base will flatten out for a split second. And you'll see actually in a well-executed takeoff release, you'll see, for example, on a backside wall, you'll see a heel side edge and a toe side edge for a split second. You'll see a tiny little down edge mark because the tail flattens out just through pressure, because they're maintaining pressure on it, but they're not popping, they're not ollieing, at least they shouldn't be. If they are, might be because it's an undervert pipe, or they're just, they learn some very strange movement.
All right, sweet. Chris, I'm going to cut you off there. And thanks very much for presenting. That was sweet. I hope lots of people learned a lot about pipe riding. I certainly did. That was awesome. Any further questions, or if you want to continue this conversation with Chris, you can do so. Add him online, or you can shoot him a message right here in the Zoom chat, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to answer your question. So thanks very much. All right, I'm gonna swing it over to Chris Rogers here, who's going to be talking about the 6 fundamentals for us today, and going through that for us. So I'm sorry we ran a little over on time there, Chris, but yeah, floor is yours. Take it away.
No, it's all good. Thank you, Chris. Most of this crew being in Rocky gets to hear people like me and Tony all the time and be at exams and clinics, and it's good to have faces from other divisions chatting. Thank you for that. That was really cool overview of pipe riding, and using your expertise and experience to build some skills in Rocky. Really appreciate that.
Very well. Thanks, man.
So I reached out to a few different people to bounce some ideas off what to present here, and one of the topics that came up repeatedly in different conversations was kind of actual application of the 6 fundamentals, the snowboard fundamentals, and what they are, and why we've gone that route, and then kind of how that's going to play out in terms of exams and education in the next few years. So I'll jump right into this with a little PowerPoint, just put some stuff on the screen. So hopefully you guys are familiar with this picture. This is the learning connection model. This is what the previous team rolled out in Ushuaia at Interski in 2015, kind of highlighting people skills, technical skills, and teaching skills. And so today, focusing on those 6 fundamentals, will be up in the technical skills triangle, really talking about the snowboard and how that kind of fundamental movement or body movements and board performances turn into the 6 fundamentals. When we talk about skills, obviously we have to include skills.
Nobody's gonna go out with me. Have you asked anybody yet? No, but who would? I don't even have any good skills. What do you mean? Like skills, bow hunting skills, computer hacking skills. Girls only want boyfriends who have great skills.
So You got to have good skills if you want to have a partner, right? This is the key. You got to have good technical skills. So this started out as body movements, flexion, extension, rotation, right? Nothing new here. This is our snowboard fundamentals for the last couple of decades. We've talked about flex, extension, rotation as our body movements, and board performances, tilt, twist, pivot, and pressure. And the key thing here with the 6 fundamentals is none of that's changed, right? The 6 fundamentals are applications, combinations of the board performances and the body movements. And the entire goal with those fundamentals was to create a common language across all disciplines. So if you look at Alpine, at cross country, at adaptive, at telemark, and now with snowboard, all of our disciplines have these kind of fundamentals that are written in a very similar way. And the goal for that was alignment and making things easy. I mean, any of you that have been on the road, leading clinics or talking to instructors in other divisions, you talk to a ski school director and they go, oh, what are the snowboard fundamentals? Similar, ski went through this whole process, but they were just about 5 years ahead of us. They had previously what they called the skills concept and talking about edging, pressure, and rotary. Nobody really understood the skills concept, and they evolved that into the 5 fundamentals as a way to describe what it is that we do a little bit better. And as that took hold, everyone started asking, well, what are the snowboard fundamentals? And this has been like probably a five year, maybe 10-year process, moving from kind of what the Alpine side was doing into how are we going to address kind of snowboard fundamentals, especially because for the most of us, we felt like our fundamentals pretty much nailed it. Flex, extension, rotation, it's what the human body can do and what the snowboard can actually do, tilt, twist, pivot, and pressure. Like our fundamentals are truly fundamental. These elements of our fundamentals are truly fundamental. And where we ended up, and this was the national task force from, which is discipline or division leaders from, or discipline leaders from all the divisions getting together at fall conference, as well as the teams, kind of the last 2 teams were involved in this project, and really taking the body movements, board performances, and saying, how do we actually use them? What are the body movements that create those board performances? And how do we make this accessible to any new member? Like, you know, any full cert's going to be able to describe how the body movements and board performances interrelate. But for a new instructor, a new hire, somebody going for their level 1, or especially coming from the Alpine side and going for that 2nd certification, creating this verbiage in a similar format makes it much more accessible to new snowboard instructors. So starting with the first one, control the relationship of the center of mass to the base of support to direct pressure along the length of the snowboard. So this is talking about this one, right? Moving pressure along the length of the snowboard. And that can happen with the body moving on top of the snowboard, or it can happen with moving the snowboard underneath a stable upper body, right? And the key with these fundamentals, the way they're written, is very much to align with those other discipline fundamentals. They sound really nerdy. None of us expect anyone to memorize that. And there's a difference between how we're going to use it, kind of the vernacular, how we're going to say it when we talk about these fundamentals, and the way it's written in the book so that it's all aligned. So what we're talking about here is managing pressure along the length of the board. If somebody can say that, they understand this fundamental, right? It's as simple as that. We don't need to have all those other words in it whenever we're talking about it. The other thing with the fundamentals is they talk about the what of the relationship between the body and the board, not how. So getting into how you're controlling the relationship with the center of mass to the base of support to direct pressure along the length of the board is getting beyond the fundamentals. That's getting into our actual movement patterns and in an area maybe that you're giving feedback or receiving feedback in a training format. The what, the fundamental is the what. What's the relationship between the body movement and the board performance? And then when we get into the how, you can start getting into the more detail about how the rider's flexing and extending, or what joints they're using, what different movements they're making. Second one, control the relationship of the center of mass to the base of support to direct pressure along the width of the board. So again, manage pressure along the width of the board. This time we're talking about lateral pressure across the snowboard, right? So that movement, not talking about tilt yet, just talking about that lateral movement. So that when the rider's got weight over that toe side edge, maybe riding flat across the cat track and starts to shift weight over towards their heels, there's this kind of dead spot before we go actual heel to toe. It's really just moving pressure along the width of the snowboard. That's the easiest place to describe that piece of it. Control the magnitude of pressure created through board surface interaction. This one's a little bit bigger, and I'll actually pull up the ski slide a little bit later and show the ski slide side by side. But this one, we really wanted to be specific about board or surface interaction. So this could be talking about snow, it could be talking about a rail, it could be talking about a jump, all of the different sliding surface that we could possibly be on, right? You're always controlling that pressure created through board and surface interaction, managing vertical pressure. So again, the what is that we need to control vertical pressure. The how could be down weighting, it could be up weighting, it could be retraction, right? And so all of those elements are covered within this one fundamental. Anything about vertical pressure are covered in this one. Control the board's pivot through flexion, extension, and rotation of the body. So managing pivot, right? In the alpine side, it's all defined under rotary. We separate out the rotation body movement and the pivot of the snowboard. And so rotation can lead to pivot. We can talk about counter rotation. We can talk about all sorts of different ways to rotate. Again, that's the how. The what is that a rider needs to control the board's pivot through flex, extension, rotation of the body. We also thought it was really important to include that flex and extension as well as rotation, right? Because of the way we're connected on our board, we can create pivot through twist. And this actually, it's the worst part of this board is it doesn't really twist well, but through that twist, through that independent flex extension of the body, we can create rotation in the snowboard as well, create that pivot. So it's important when you get into the alpine side, a lot of them are much more one directional. If you flex and extend your ankles on the ski, you're gonna move weight fore and aft. That's not necessarily gonna create pivot in the ski. Control the board's tilt through a combination of inclination and angulation. Again, we're just talking about managing tilt, but we get specific here about inclination and angulation because, and this is again something that we borrowed from the alpine side, this idea of inclination and angulation. So inclination is any angle between the rider and the snow. So if we have a snow surface and the rider is dipping into that snow surface, this is inclination. Angulation talks about the amount of flex and extension during that inclination. So the rider is in an inclined position and they're angulated or they're not angulated. And you have degrees of inclination. You could have a very low amount of inclination with a lot of angulation, or you could have a lot of angulation without much inclination in like a Michael Jackson. So that kind of combination of inclination and angulation, managing tilt. And this one also obviously is related to, but separate from lateral pressure. So we've got lateral pressure moving across the board. And as we get into a more inclined position, through that flex position, we're going to be managing tilt as well. Once we're up on edge, we're not doing a lot of managing pressure edge to edge, right? We're not really applying pressure to our toe side edge or managing that lateral pressure as much as we are managing tilt. And I'll get into the lenses of that a little bit later. And then control torsional flex of the board using flex, extension, and rotation of the body. So our final fundamental, that sixth fundamental of actually creating torsional twist in the board. And it's the one that is truly different from the alpine side. Manage torsional flex. So all six of those up on screen. Control the relationship of the center of mass to the base of support, to direct pressure along the length of the board, to direct pressure along the width of the board. Control the vertical pressure, control pivot, control tilt, and control torsional flex. Before I go any farther, are there any questions on those six fundamentals in terms of how they're kind of laid out? Do they make sense? Any questions there before we go any further?
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
Were you a part of developing the fundamentals? Were you on that task force?
Yeah, so the National Task Force is, I could pull up the full list of people that are involved. It's been about 14 people from day one. It's rotated a little bit. Chuck's a little bit more involved than I am now as the Rocky representative, but there's basically been one or two representatives from every division that have been working on that.
So the question that I have, this is why I prefaced it with that, was how did you guys come to the agreement that there was pressure across the width of the board and then edge pressure or edge angle, right? Because you're considering those as two separate things, right? So, and you could, I guess the question I'm going to get to is, are you suggesting that once we get into angulation or inclination, we're still addressing edge pressure, right? It's just two separate thoughts, right?
Right. So that idea, that the real key being when we talk about, a little easier to see over here, yeah. Talk about that actual edge angle versus the way the rider's positioning or applying weight to the board. And when you think about like riding flat across a cat track, right? You can very gently apply pressure to the toe side edge, and if you had some way of being at like board surface, you're going to see some amount of tilt happening there, like on a microscopic level, right? If you're digging in the toe edge, the heel edge probably has to be coming off the snow surface to some extent. But really separating that idea of managing pressure across the width of the snowboard, that lateral pressure, versus talking about tilt. And so often when we're talking about tilt, we're talking about managing tilt through a carved turn, and we felt it was important to have those as separate concepts.
That's cool. I mean, it must have been quite an interesting process to go through that. I didn't sit on that task force at all, but having enough discussions across the country about it, it's like the debate.
It was a super interesting process, and we had anywhere from 3 to like 15 fundamentals at any given time. Like, oh, we ended up too narrow. Now they're so vague, they don't say anything. And then you end up on the other side and like, all right, we've got 15 fundamentals and they're so specific that it's way too complex. And like, just went back and forth and ended up very close to where Alpine was. When you look at the actual movements, and I'll pull that slide up in a second, of their foot to foot becomes our fore and aft, right? So the human body movements don't change at all from the Alpine side to the snowboard side, but how they relate to the equipment being 90 degrees, we ended up deciding that their fundamentals captured everything we needed to say except for twist, but our relationship is 90 degrees turned.
Got it. Cool.
Hey, Chris, this is KB. I think it's pretty cool that you guys are starting to talk more about the lateral pressure versus tilt as in terms of how we move on the snowboard. I know I've had a few conversations with Chuck Hewitt about that this past season. My question is, though, as you talk about the lateral movement and tilt, specifically on the heel side, what are some of the things you guys discussed in relation to angulation versus inclination while still managing that lateral pressure on the heel side to come up with the concept?
Yeah, so there's actually been a lot of discussion about the inclination angulation, and it really, it's something we stole from Alpine and completely bastardized, to be honest. And Tony could talk a little bit more about inclination angulation on skiing probably, but at its root, right? If we've got two skis here and you actually just incline to the side without flexing and extending, you've taken pressure off your outside ski, right? If you're in a left-hand turn here and you tip, they call it banking, tip into the hill, you've taken pressure off your outside ski, where everything in that Alpine side, they want pressure on the downhill ski. So to the Alpine world, banking or true like inclination without flex and extension is really viewed as a negative thing. It's not helpful to performance skiing. Whereas what they talk about as angulation would then be, again, with skis pointing out this way, flexing into the hill this way, which lets them apply pressure to this outside ski by flexing that inside knee. And so that term angulation comes from this movement to turn and allow pressure. So when it was borrowed into the snowboard side of things, it became that idea of inclination is a more tipping movement, angulation is a more flex movement, but really that the word we were missing was banking. And if you go back to the technical manual that Jason Chatrump wrote or heavily authored, it's actually included in that manual. It talks about inclination in a flex position being angulation, inclination in a tall position being banking. But that word banking never really made it into our vernacular. So getting back to all of this, the relationship there is when you're in that carved turn, you've got pressure on that heel side edge. You also have a high degree of tilt, right? In the middle of a high performance, large radius carved turn, you've got a large amount of tilt. You've also got a lot of pressure on that heel side edge. So as we create a vertical pressure management, as we either extend or flex or retract to change edges, we're reducing the pressure on the heel side edge. And that's why this concept is different. Our edge angle hasn't changed yet, but by flexing or by extending, we've reduced the pressure on the heel side edge so that we can move. So that's why we thought it was so important to have those as two separate concepts. We can talk about tilt separately from pressure. And as you go through the body of the carve, through that control phase of the carve, you're applying more pressure to that heel side edge. And as you unweight your snowboard, come up and over, you're then reducing pressure. And while the pressure is reduced, you're using that reduction in pressure to change edges. You're setting that new edge, getting back into that high tilt, and applying pressure back on the snowboard. But that they're absolutely intertwined and needed two separate concepts to talk about.
If I could just add on that, it's really nice to have a framework to discuss with people the understanding of those two things. Because if you were ever having a discussion about edge angle, and somebody asks you, well, what about edge pressure? And then you have to go into explaining, well, yes, there's edge pressure, and this is how it's being affected. And just to have people thinking those two same streams of thought, or those streams of thought at the same time, is really, really good. So that was a nice move. I mean, I will admit that the number of fundamentals seems like a large number, but when you get right down to it, there are a couple things that we have to be able to discuss differently, and it was good that you guys took the time to assess that out.
Yeah, and there's others. So one of the ones that was really heavily discussed was the concept of bend, right? So like snowboard bend as a fundamental, it's the one that we don't talk about. It's implied through pressure, right? Fore and aft pressure. And now with managing pressure along the length of the snowboard and managing pressure vertically, that now does a better job of talking about bend, whereas before it was just tied in there in pressure somewhere. But there are a bunch. I mean, we could have gone to 7. I mean, that was probably the biggest discussion in that whole group, was this leaving it at 6 or going to 7 to include bend. So a couple of ways in terms of application. One of the most valuable ways I've found, and it was really cool sitting on a webinar that Chris Lane was leading in Western a couple weeks ago. He and I kind of ended up on the same concept without talking about it simultaneously. When you sit in when you go to get your eyes checked at the optometrist's office, and they pull the thing down in front of your face and they're like, lens 1, click, or lens 2, click. All right, now lens 2, click, or lens 3, click, right? And they go through all these different lenses to see which one's the best, gives you the best vision of the letters on the way down the hallway. And the fundamentals work the same way. The thing with the fundamentals is the word fundamental we've used kind of interchangeably with truth. These are truths about snowboarding. Those 6 things are always happening all the time. You are always managing twist. You are always managing pivot. You are always managing tilt. You are always managing pressure lengthwise, vertically, and across the snowboard. They are happening in different levels of importance at any given time, but you're always doing all of them. In the middle of a carved turn, you are managing pivot, right? We're not pivoting, but we're managing pivot. In the middle of a 360, you are managing tilt. You're not actively tilting, but you're managing tilt. And so the wording of the fundamentals is very specifically done to talk about what we are always doing all the time. So when you actually start to use them and give people feedback or receive feedback or do movement analysis, the way to use the fundamentals is to look at which one is the low-hanging fruit for giving or receiving feedback, for doing MA, for making an analysis, which 1 or 2 are going to be the most effective at any given time, right? Lens 1 or 2, 2 or 3, 3 or 4. So when you're watching a rider, it gives you a checklist. You can go right through them. And if you're like, I've done a couple of these webinars now on using the 6 fundamentals for movement analysis. And if you pull up that list side by side with a video of somebody riding, you can, and they're in the middle of a carved turn, you can be like, are we going to talk about managing pressure across the width of the snowboard? Well, this one may not be super effective in this video. Are we going to talk about managing pressure on the length of the snowboard? I can see this rider starting to skid in the initiation, and then they lock into the car, right? So maybe we want to talk about managing pressure along the length of the snowboard. We're going to talk about managing pivot. Well, we see this little pivot in the initiation of the turn. This is probably another one we want to talk about. And you go through that list, and it makes it, it's like a checklist for how you want to address or use the fundamentals. It makes it really easy to highlight 1 or 2 things. They're always all present, but 1 or 2 lenses that are going to be the most effective to talk about. Cool. I'm going to pull this back up and just real quick jump through the relationship with the alpine fundamentals. So you'll see a lot of the similar wording. Control the relationship of the center of mass to the base of support to direct pressure along the length of the skis. Same exact thing, right? What's, again, going back to the idea that the fundamentals aren't the how, they're the what. This relationship is exactly the same between skiing and snowboarding. When you get into the how, they're going to control the relationship of the center of mass to the base of support, direct pressure along the length of the ski by flexing and extending their ankle joint primarily, as well as their knees a little bit and their hips a little bit, right? That's going to move them forward and aft on the ski. For us to manage our pressure along the length of the board, we're talking about independent flex and extension of our front and back ankle, knee, and hip joints to move our center mass or to move the snowboard underneath our body to move forward and aft on the snowboard. So the how is, it has that 90-degree relationship from skiing to snowboarding, but the actual what of the fundamental, totally identical. We manage pressure on the length of our equipment. Control edge angles through a combination of inclination and angulation. This one is, again, very similar to ours about controlling tilt. They talk about edge angle where we talk about tilt. Their fundamental there is edging. Ours has been tilt. We kept our words the same, but that concept is exactly the same. How we do it on skis or on a snowboard, different in terms of actual application, but the what of that relationship is the same. Control the ski rotation with leg rotation separate from the upper body. So they really get into that idea of this is a picture of great skiing, and we wanted to stay away from that definition of like this is great snowboarding, but talk about that. What is that relationship between the body movements and the board performance?
Hey,
and so
Chris,
for us, yeah.
I was literally just thinking that I love that in our fundamentals, it took more words to describe them, but it doesn't lock us into what accuracy is necessarily, because there's so many different applications of movements, you know, and different things we do in snowboarding. So, and same is true for skiing. It's funny that skiing always gravitates towards this is the picture that we're defining right now. You must assimilate. It's a little bit Borgish.
Yeah. Yeah, that picture of great skiing is like a very big piece of what the Alpine fundamentals ended up as. And ours was like, well, these need to be just as applicable in a hand plant as they are in the middle of a carved turn. Control pressure from ski to ski and direct pressure towards the outside ski. This gets covered for us under managing pressure along the width of the board. That same idea of their foot to foot is lateral pressure. That's the same thing as our lateral pressure management is the same thing as our toe to heel edge pressure management. And then regulate pressure vertical through ski snow contact. Notice they didn't say surface, they said ski / snow, and you know, because racing skis aren't meant to go on boxes. But we wanted to include that idea of surface, not just snow. And then that last one that we included, torsional flex through flex and extension of the rotation of the body. And that's, you know, if you go, so the first place these were published are in the Teaching Snow Sports Manual, and they're listed as examples of fundamental relationships between body movements and board performances, because we weren't ready to commit to that wording of fundamentals yet when that book was published. But this wording is slightly different than what was published, that addition of the word rotation under torsional flex. That was originally just control the torsional flex of the board through flex extension of the body. And when we started actually talking about it, obviously as you steer that knee out, you can create twist in the snowboard as well. So we thought it was important to include that word rotation through the femoral rotation can create twist as well. So at this point, we've been using and working with these for 3 or 4 years in pretty much this form. And last year, last summer, about a year ago, actually, the Snowboard Task Force voted to make these kind of final-ish wording. There's still a little bit of wordsmithing happening here or there, but this is the basic idea isn't going to change at this point. And kind of what's next is you'll start to see that work into divisional education and exam, you know, clinics just like this, and presenting this information a little bit more broadly. From there, what you'll see over the next 2 to 3 years is this information starting to show up in more divisional content. I would expect within the next 3 years, we'll start to use this wording in our exams at level 1, level 2, level 3, and kind of working into replacing that for body movements, board performances, starting to work that into movement analysis and how we do movement analysis. And it's going to be a really interesting couple of years as we ramp that up and start to educate people about what the fundamentals are. That wording is going to start showing up in exams. And already we've started to see some of our new members that are more familiar with the 6 fundamentals than our longtime membership, because they've been exposed to it in the e-learnings or in the new hire training, right? Because in some places this is being talked about a little bit more. Some of our new instructors are more well versed in it than our longtime instructors.
We see that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chris. You finish.
No. I was just gonna say any other questions or thoughts about them. Happy to chat more about these fundamentals.
I was just going to share that we see that type of reality existing, especially with snow operating and train-based learning, where new instructors just embrace it and they go, all right, this is the way. And past instructors with lots of knowledge and experience and very valid concerns and ideas and thoughts, they have a tendency to hold out. And I've noticed that in the introduction to this, and it's been kind of fun because in this case, I'm definitely not on the creating side of it, right? And so for me, I get to experience it as a user, as an instructor. And I will say that it feels kind of nebulous. The approach, the delivery, the explanation has not been very good. And the fundamentals take some explaining. They take an environment like this for people to go, oh, I get it. That makes total sense. And so I found myself walking through the process of explaining this to myself and then to others to promote it. And, while I knew some of what was going on, it's just, it's been very cool to go through that. And I will share this. And I think a lot of divisions and a lot of people you're going to face, a lot of longtime examiners, trainers, there's pushback, and the pushback is, well, the fundamentals, fundamental movements and the board performances are so simple. You don't have to explain it. It doesn't take much explaining. And it took some explaining. It took people a while to memorize the 4 board performances, for example. And that was hard. And now we've got 6, sentences or, more long sentences that now have to be understood, memorized. And I do really appreciate how you took this presentation and went, all right, the movement performance concepts equal this. It's a very good way to approach that. And I really appreciate it. It's just awesome to see it starting to mature a little bit, and it's got a ways to go, I think. I think that the organization needs to make it more visual. And I'd say that for the Alpine side too. The Alpiners are, because I do a ton of Alpine training across the country, and the Alpiners struggle with it too. I will literally drop an Alpine core, fundamental on a group of instructors. They're like, what the are you talking about right now? I'm like, well, let me explain it. I just don't think it's become visual yet. I hope it does. And then I think it'll be really easy to palate. And the way you explained it was awesome. So great job.
Thanks, Chris. Tony was in the room. We actually had a conversation about creating a visual addendum to this, which we wanted to film this year and just it didn't happen. Maybe next year. But we actually want to do like a Billy Mays style infomercial sales pitch on the 6 fundamentals, and like each person highlighting one of the fundamentals. And Fang was going to be Billy May and just like fully like 80s music and sell the fundamentals. But no, your point there is really valid. It's been, as you know, any project that takes on a cross division kind of scope ends up getting a lot of voices in the room and a lot of opinions. And there was nothing broken with our fundamentals. The reason that we created the fundamentals was pressure from ski school managers, from directors, from a lot of the Alpine side of things that wanted a better understanding of what the snowboard fundamentals are. And from that side of things, it's been a huge success. When you go to a children's cert or any kind of interaction with the Alpine world and the ability to say, hey, here's apples to apples. Here's the comparison.
Yeah.
The value there has been amazing. Selling it to our audience and even for ourselves to say like, we need these, it didn't come from our own internal drive to say, hey, there's something broken in our fundamentals. And that's absolutely been a tough part of it.
It might be worth approaching it with the idea that this is an expansion of the idea. And this is we're diving deeper, we're going into greater explanation, we're doing the math, and we're just trying to explain that. And this also serves to help align some thinking, across the different disciplines. I think the hardest thing is that you're still, we all still, I see this all the time. There's still just that sort of internal gut feeling of like, oh, the organization is just forcing us to do something, or this is the next thing that the national team created. I've heard this so many times, like, what does the national team do? Well, once a year they create some new thing that we have to memorize. Like, it's like, well, sorry about that. I feel so bad that I did that to you. But at the same time, like, I just think that the more you push it the way you did, that movements, performances equal fundamentals, that was a really very simple and very good approach. And I think it's less threatening. It's funny, like my friend Blair McLeod, who I interviewed on Friday, when he and I talked about movement performance concepts, like we're a couple of old dogs, right? So we're sitting there going, oh, what is this stuff? Here's another thing. Here's this, here's that. And we picked at it, and I went, Blair, but at the same time, right? You and I, just because we know this one thing works doesn't mean that we can be dinosaurs and block the expansion of idea and thought. And that's what this really is. It's a deeper dive into understanding. I love that. And I think that's how you should probably approach it. That's just my 2 cents. Just a deep dive into understanding.
Well, it really leads itself to a growth mindset, right?
Yeah.
Our sport, and any sport, is never set in stone or fixed. It's always a work in progress, and you're moving forward. So the way to combat that is to start talking more about a growth mindset, which will allow you to more readily accept some of these core values that continue to change. Because what he just went through is no different than pivot, pressure, tilt, twist.
Yeah.
It's just a different lens to look at them. And actually, I think the way he explained it here, I hate to say this, but helped me understand tilt, twist, pivot, and pressure better. The only thing I wish is that we bring crossover and cross under term vernacular back.
Was that like a begrudging compliment right there? Is that what I just heard? Was that like I gotta compliment him on this? Yeah, I agree. No,
it was awesome. I was jokingly, because I said growth mindset, but then bring back the crossover versus cross under language. But no, it was just awesome the way he took those 4 performances that we all know so well and tied it into in my opinion, a much larger concept without getting away from what they mean.
I'm curious, like, there are some less experienced instructors that I saw on this call. Like, how do you guys feel about the fundamentals? I'm asking you a question, Chris. I don't mean to hijack.
Yeah. No, that's good.
Like, anybody that's like a level 2 or only been teaching for less than 5 years kind of thing? Go for it, Tyson.
Dude, I dig them mainly because you're tying in the board performances straight to the body movements. And the other thing, and this was one of the things that, going through my Cert 1 and into my Cert 2 process, that kind of hung up on me, was how freaking important pressure is. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've expanded it from just one thing that we talk about to 3 separate things.
Yeah.
So I fully endorse these. I love them.
That's been the really common, and anyone else that wants to jump in on that, but it's been the common feedback we've heard is when we started building this was like, and if we already know, like, everybody understands how the performances and the body movements relate. And then the counter argument was, well, if everyone understands it, it should be really easy to say what they are. Why don't we just say what they are? And with that, those 2 camps went back and forth over and over and over again. We ended up with these 6. But in the younger instructor, in the newer instructor side of things, that's where we've seen the most value. Is for a lot of people for the last 10 years, we've never actually said, well, this is how you and again, they're the what of the relationship. There's lots of different ways we can get into the how we actually manage those relationships. But the what of the relationship is, this is what we do to create tilt. This is what we do to create flex extension. And I've thought for years that our biggest shortfalling in tilt, twist, pivot, pressure was it didn't adequately address how important pressure is. And pressure is a much bigger concept because we're managing lengthwise, vertically, across the snowboard. You talk about most flex, most extended, talk about border cross absorption, talk about popping off jump, like the amount of different ways that we use pressure, it's so much bigger than those other concepts. And so the fundamentals do better address that through breaking out into 3 separate areas.
Well said. I was going to share this thought that I was having, which is, for years, I always will use the ranges of motion, which I, snuck into the first freestyle manual, and I love them because it's body under board, feet under board, body over feet kind of movement. It's talking about movement, planes of movement really more than anything. So toe to heel, foot to foot, up and down, rotation, right? And what the movement performance concepts never did very well was talk about movement. They just limited it to the fundamental movements, which are just flex, extend, and rotate. It's just, honestly, that's not enough to describe all the different ways we blend those two movements to create these different planes or paths of motion that affect the board performances directly. And so there was no way to couple the two together, which was always very frustrating, which is where those ranges of motion came from for me. And what the fundamentals has started to do is open the door to tying those two things together. Ranges of motion, combined movements that affect board performances, and coupling those and turning them into the fundamentals. And I really do think that's probably one of the strongest attributes to what you guys have done with the fundamentals.
Yeah, thanks. And actually, another thing that brings up is the other key point of the fundamentals is that it doesn't replace all of our other tools, right? Reference alignments still exist. Planes of motion still exist. Dirt, turd, whatever you want to call it, TID still exists. All of those other tools, talking about initiation, control, finishes of a turn, or ATML on a jump, all of those other tools still exist. The fundamentals are just one more way, and to what you said earlier, consolidates or expands from the body movements, board performances, and puts that all in one way of relationship. But all of those other tools we have for describing movements, timing, intensity, all of those other things still exist as well.
I will just say that I did like how you stuck in magnitude into vertical pressure management, which was like straight from Alpine, which is like, I like that. But it also does tie into now dirt or TID or whatever, and kind of like provides that pathway for people.
Yeah, good catch there, Conrad.
That was my catch.
That was my, whatever, dude.
Nice job, Dana. Conrad, that was pretty shiesty. Pretty shiesty.
Who's the skier here?
Blame it on being quarantined.
Yeah.
Right on.
All right. Well, sweet, Chris. That was awesome. Did you have any more things to present on this?
No. So I've done 3 or 4 now of using the fundamentals for movement analysis. I've done 1 in Intermountain, 2 in Central, and 1 in Rocky. And I don't have any scheduled right now, but I will likely have a few more scheduled. In May, it seems like people are definitely starting to shift towards summer mindset and the like less demand for stuff like movement analysis, but I'll be looking at running those again in the fall as well. But starting to use them, there's a lot more we can go into in depth in terms of application. But overall overview there, and the one personal thing I'll say is like I did my Alpine level 1 last year. I started working towards my 2 this year, and hopefully do that next season. But for me, like the value in having gone through all of these is the Alpine fundamentals are so much easier for me to understand now because of working with the snowboard fundamentals. And I really think like our easy low-hanging fruit that we've seen is, like I said, newer instructors that have come in and been like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. This is how they relate. And I think the longer term, bigger picture is the value to all of our membership, myself included, in terms of trying to apply what we already know in snowboarding to the Alpine discipline. It makes it so much easier. And for any of you that work at a resort that gets a pay raise or a bump for doing your Alpine level 1, it's just a little bit easier to do so with the fundamentals in mind.
And I will say that it also, it makes newer instructors sound smarter too, because when they're explaining it to their guests, they've now got a bit more of a framework. Whereas I think, Tyson, before you were saying that like pressure, and then they go on this long rant about what pressure is and how it can be all these different things. And now we've simplified it and condensed it down in a little bit easier package format to tell to their clients, makes them look better.
2 questions I have, Chris. One is, can you share the slides that you presented? And then 2 is, what are the talks or plans for now starting to move a lot of this into our manuals versus, it just being talked about?
Yeah, so I'm happy to share these slides. I'll dump the the snowboard fundamentals, the 6 fundamentals slide in to the chat here, and then anyone that wants can either shoot me an email or text, or yeah, shoot me an email and I can send you the full slide deck. But in terms of going forward, what the Alpine side did was issue an addendum to the technical manual that included the fundamentals, because those weren't out when they put their fundamentals out either. But you'll probably see that as like a little addendum. There will be some news. Let's see. I think our next like update to the technical manual is probably still like 5 or 6 years out, so that'll bridge the gap there. But the digital edition, which hopefully we're getting a new app to access all the digital stuff in the next couple of years, the digital version will have it included within, like it'll be built into it. So the digital side will be pretty seamless in terms of publishing it. The print one will be you can request like the paper pamphlet for the Alpine side, and they send it to you, and it like clips into the back of the book. So we'll do something similar to that. And then any of the future manuals that come out will have it built in, obviously. You'll see a lot in terms of we're looking at like e-learnings and some like videos to share, stuff like this, recorded webinars that we'll put the team on to share and explain it. But one of the ways that we're really leaning on getting the information out is because it was a cross division project to develop these, and there's leaders from each division that were really involved in creating them. We want it to come from the divisions, and that there's divisional buy-in from their ed staff. So our last 2 seasons at Rocky Mountain Ed Staff Training, we've been talking about these fundamentals and starting to share them with our ed staff. You'll see more clinics like this in the next year or so, starting to branch that information out to RMT and trainer type individuals. We'll be running through something like this at fall training and resort trainers next fall, or member school management. And the more that we can build awareness and comfort within this kind of group, the more we're going to start to see that information trickle out from the division side of things as well.
My question was going to be, how much of this stuff is now going to be required or expected in exams?
That'll be a couple years out, Conrad. It will, like I said, none of us expect anyone to memorize these word for word. I'm certainly not expecting in any exam for somebody to know like what the word for word is. I don't know them word for word, but I can talk about managing pressure along the length of the snowboard and across the width of the snowboard and vertically tilt, twist, pivot. In the level 1s, probably even starting next year, we'll start to clinic including it, because the level 1 is so much of a clinic combined with an exam. We'll be providing that information side by side, right? And we've always talked about, well, here's how you manage twist. Well, now we have like the dictionary definition of how we manage twist to explain that with. And so we might not be saying, this is the only way to know this information and asking for like rote memorization of it. But the way that we start to explain how you manage twist, how you manage pressure is going to fall within the framework of the 6 fundamentals. And they're going to become more and more aware of that information. At the level 3, and then moving into the RMT over the next couple of years, you'll start to see more ownership, like questions about ownership of that, right? The fundamentals, as they start to build out assessment forms and all of that material, the Alpine side has started looking at including the fundamentals as some of the scoring at, like some of the ways that you're scored. So right now on a lot of our assessment forms, we talk about management of board performances. That might be broken out into all of the fundamentals to talk about how, how that works. But more than likely, we'll stick with body movements and board performances there, because what we really want to talk about is like, you were strong in this area or you were weak in this area. We need to focus on the retraction movement pattern, right? The how of it versus the fundamental. So that part's still a lot to come. Moving into the trainer realm, obviously, and trainer and examiner evaluations, we'll be looking at people understanding and being able to present information around the fundamentals.
Yeah, it was more so to do with like the lower levels, because as you said, I think at the higher levels, at the level 3 or above, most people can put 2 and 2 together, right? But at the level 1 and the level 2, they need a little bit more from somebody presenting it to them. So that was, yeah. Thanks.
The presentation pathway has taken a little while. So the National Task Force brainstormed these I want to say in fall of 2016 when they took the form that they're in now. There's been wordsmithing since then, but it was fall of 2016 when they were kind of formalized like this, and we brought them to Rocky Mountain Examiner fall training, and we're all hyped up like, oh, this just came out of fall conference, this is a new thing, we're going to present it. We were the first ed staff to have fall training that year. We had a couple of people that stuck around after fall conference, so I think there were a couple from Western, maybe Doug, I'm pretty sure Leah was there, Brian Donovan from East was there. So we had a couple other people there. We had this audience. We like roll out the fundamentals that we've been working on at fall conference, and it just got like mowed down. Nick Alfieri stood in front of the group and presented it, and he describes it as being like somebody got out a machine gun and just shot him down over and over and over again. And that led, like, it took the entire national task force took a step back, and we're like, okay, we're gonna have to be a little bit more tactful in how we present these. We need to be a little bit more sure of them ourselves. Like we just drafted them. We didn't have ownership over them ourselves. It was a pretty big learning moment for us. And it's now taken like a 4-year rollout to get to where we're starting to talk about them in clinics like this. And, and actually we've worked with them enough and understand them. I think the division leaders and the task force members have all led clinics on them now and have a better understanding and ownership and have a better idea of the strengths and the areas where there's going to be critiques of them. And so it's been a process, and we're certainly not ready to just like drop it into CERT and replace the board performances and body movements yet.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Does anybody else have any other questions? No? Okay.
Can I share some good news for people?
Good news?
You guys want good news?
Yeah.
So it's not confirmed, but there's internal discussion of Timberline opening their resort with 2 lifts on the 15th of May. So I think that's good news, especially for me because I live right here. But for those of you who might be thinking like you really want to just reconnect with snowboarding, it really looks like it will happen. It'll be on a limited basis, so just stay tuned. Again, nothing confirmed. I just thought I'd share some insider information with you guys and get you smiling a little bit.
Sick.
Get your spare bedroom ready, Chris.
It's ready, bro. It's ready.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for coming out and being here and doing this again with us for another week. You guys were awesome. Thanks to Chris and Chris for presenting. Both really interesting topics. And yeah, I think both of you guys have posted some stuff in the chat there. So if anybody wants to reach out to either of you. But yeah, Lynn.